and that's just wrong. So I decided to get involved with politics. I ran in 2010 against Tim Bishop. It was unfortunately welcome. Please help yourself. We have coffee too. Welcome. Come on up if you like. Or? Oh, okay. Okay. Well, thanks. So take coffee with you. Unfortunately, it was the closest race in the country. I was ahead by 400 votes after Election Day. I was the Republican Conservative Party candidate. I went down to Washington for the freshman orientation, and then the absentee ballots were counted. And we were in court, and there was a big mess because some people had voted twice, some people had voted on Election Day in New York City, because Tim ended up winning primarily because he got a huge a lot of absentee votes in South and East Hampton were huge for him. God bless him, he did it. So, and those were a lot of people from the city. So it was a big mess, but I ended up losing by 593 votes. It was the closest race in the country. And I'm running again, and people ask, why am I running again? Because I have a 5 and a 1-year-old, and I have lived the American dream, and that American dream is being eroded by what's going on in the country today. And people like Tim Bishop are responsible for that. First, we have a debt that's over $15 trillion, and that's increasing by over $1 trillion every year. Now, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand you can't spend money you don't have. And there's going to be a time when we're going to pay the consequences for that. That time may be that next time that the Fed tries to sell more of its treasury bills for debt, that China says, no, thank you. We're not buying any more of your debt. Or it may be that Social Security, which is the largest purchaser of U.S. debt, is Social Security. That's where your Social Security funds go. Social Security Trust Fund is in T-bills, a special kind of T-bill. If you follow the markets, you probably know your return on your treasury bills is marginal. But at some point, because Social Security, we're risking it being insolvent, and we can talk about, I want to talk about that too. Because of that, Social Security won't be able to step up and buy American debt. So at some point, what's happening in Greece and happening in Europe could be happening in this country. So the debt is totally irresponsible. And guess what? We don't even have a budget. It's been 3 years since we've had a budget, and yet we're still paying our congressmen on both sides of the aisle. And call me old-fashioned, but I would say immediately, if you don't have a budget, nobody gets paid. And guess what? If we instituted that law, they'd get a budget in a hurry, because those folks want to get paid first and foremost. So it's the debt. It's the jobs. That's going to be a huge theme in this election, the lack of jobs. And for older people, for younger people, there are no jobs right now. How many families have children who are living at home who can't find jobs? How many families have children and grandchildren when they're graduating from college can't afford to come back to Long Island because the cost of living is so high and because there are no jobs here? It's a terrible situation. And yet we aren't doing anything to encourage job growth here in the 1st Congressional District and here in our country. And I put forth a 10-point job plan. You can see it on my website, where I talk very systematically about steps that we can take, from cutting taxes for small companies, because small companies are the crux of the 1st Congressional District. They're the engine for this country. Cutting taxes for them, getting rid of some of the burdensome regulations. It's so hard just to conduct business. Sometimes local government and federal government pushes people out of business. They make it so hard. We should be welcoming them. We want your business here. We need those jobs here. We want to amortize our tax basis so everybody's property taxes don't go up. And one way to handle our rising property taxes is to expand the tax base. Businesses can absorb a lot of that cost, but if there are no businesses in Shoreham, when you lost the power plant, that killed it. Because suddenly all that burden for paying for the schools fell on individuals and not on businesses. So we need to work on jobs. We need to fix Social Security and Medicare once and for all. Now, for older people, it's still program's going to be still solvent. But for younger folks, it's not going to be around in the future. Both those funds are going to be bankrupt at some point, sooner than we thought. The chief actuary for the government just came out and said 3 years now, sooner for Social Security, we're going to run out of money. So we've got to address the problem. We have to be honest about it. We have to protect and defend Social Security and Medicare at all costs. But what's happened right now with something like Obamacare, which I think we've got to repeal, that takes $500 billion from Medicare, and it puts it into the Obamacare program. $500 billion, switching from there to there. We can't afford that. So we have to address those programs. Those are a few of the issues that I'm passionate about. Energy, America becoming energy independent. We depend on foreign countries for a lot of our oil, and sort of a double whammy, because on the one hand, we have to pay for that oil. On the other hand, we also have to protect a lot of those countries. They're in unstable regions. The Middle East is a mess. So we're sending hundreds of billions of dollars of foreign aid there. Sometimes we're risking the lives of our men and women because we need that energy, because they got us. We know in America today there are huge reserves, both for natural gas right here in New York State and for oil. And by the way, I'm for all kinds of energy. Wind and solar. I just read Al Bubba wants to have a windmill on his property in East Hampton. God bless him. Put up the windmill. He's going to vote for Tim Bishop, but I don't care. I'm for all that stuff. But let's make energy independence one of the top priorities in this country. You'll create thousands. Somebody says 1 million jobs by becoming energy independent. We won't have a national security issue depending on these foreign countries. And we can bring down the cost of energy. And we know in Long Island, which has some of the highest energy costs around the country, that's a killer. That's another reason why businesses don't find it attractive to be here, despite the fact that we have Stony Brook University churning out highly educated graduates, despite the fact that we've got Brookhaven National Lab. Immigration. We have to deal with the immigration, or the illegal immigration problem that we have. We have a lot of folks here who are not on the books, who are using our social services. Now, we're compassionate Americans. Nobody's going to turn away a child from an emergency room. Nobody's going to say that child can't go to school. But if those folks aren't contributing to our system, if they're not paying taxes, if they're here on an undocumented basis, if there are businesses who are using employees off the books or competing unfairly against businesses that have employees on the books, that's something that we've got to deal with. We can't just pretend it doesn't exist. It's a real problem. And it's unfortunate that when certain states have tried to deal with the issue, they've gotten, criticized by the federal government. Let the federal government step in here. Let them enforce our laws. Let's deal with this realistically. Let's not just pretend it doesn't exist. So these are some of the issues. And after 2 more years of Tim Bishop being in office, he has done nothing to address the problems. Since Tim has been here, 30,000 jobs have left Long Island. Over the last 10 years, 12% of 25 to 34-year-olds, the young basis of our economy, have left Long Island. 25 to 34, 12% of 25 to 34-year-olds. That's a huge number. Home values have gone way down. I mean, I don't know about you guys. My home value in Smithtown has gone down. And there's no relief in sight right now. So we've got to make some changes. I feel incredibly passionate about this. We have a lot of advantages this election that I didn't have last time. I'm not only endorsed by the Republican and the Conservative parties, but I also have the endorsement of the Independence Party. So last time Tim was endorsed by the Independence Party, got over 7,000 votes in that line. This time they switched to me. So, he only won by 593 votes. 7,000 is, I'm not sure I'm going to get all those votes, but even a fraction of that would put us over the top. And a lot of people last election who never heard of Randy Altschuler, who frankly didn't think that I had a shot, are now stepping forward and getting involved in the race, helping our cause, because they want change. And if you want change, and I mean real change, and you want to be honest and fix some of the problems we've got, you got to start by changing our congressman. 2 more years of Tim Bishop, it's going to be 2 more years of the same old. And if you like the same old, God bless you, vote for Tim Bishop again. But if you want change, Tim's not going to do it. Even after winning the closest race in the country, Tim Bishop didn't go back to Washington and change his voting. He still votes with his party all the time. And this is clearly not a district where you should be voting with your party all the time. By the way, if I come back here 2 years from now and I vote with John Boehner, the Speaker of the House, 98% of the time, that's not right either. Because John Boehner is not right all the time for what's good for the 1st Congressional District or for the United States of America. So I'm glad to have you here this morning. I'm happy to answer any questions. I would say that my primary opponent, I think pretty much everyone in this room is a registered Republican. My primary opponent has dropped out, George Demos, but he's still on the ballot. He dropped out too late. So please, please come out and vote on the 26th. Nobody else is going to vote. I mean, the turnout's going to be really low. For the presidential primary, very, very few people voted. Less than 10% of eligible Republicans voted for that race. Actually it was less than 6%, I think, voted. So really terrible turnout. So please come on out. We want to build some momentum. We want to take that victory at the end of June, on June 26th, roll that into a lot of positive energy, and go out and win this election. So again, thank you so much for coming, and happy to answer any questions you've got. And please, you need to leave too.
How do you fight the cronyism that's there? I knew Tim Bishop for many years. I supported him for a number of years until the last election. I did not vote for him at all because I saw he was just a follower in Congress there. I mean, whatever Pelosi stands up and says jump, he says how high. you know, there was no more Tim Bishop for us. He started out as a chancellor at Southampton,
Sure.
and he's kind of died on the vine.
Yep.
I mean, he's there for the salary, he's there for the beautiful retirement package.
He's got it.
He's done nothing more to support us. I've questioned him on the Obamacare package, and he said to me, well, you know, we all have to vote for it because it's good for us. I said, well, what's in it? We don't know. It's 4,700 or 4,300 pages, and I've read some of the pages in there, and it's just not the health care. It's financial, everything else. There's a clause in there that says that if it gets through, after this January, and it gets through, they can reach into people's private pension funds, their 401ks, their IRAs, and say, okay, we can take 8% to feed these people that are entitlements, that have never worked a day in their lives, these welfare recipients that just want to take. And there's so many things that are in these clauses, and it's so confusing to read. Nothing is clear to the average person. Now, how can we change that?
You know, a couple of things. One is, I mean, I'm overall supporter of term limits. I think what happens is a lot of these people go to Washington and they're well-intentioned. But if you can make your lifetime, your life work being a congressman, then that becomes a very good thing to do. And if that's how you pay your mortgage and how you send your kids to school, you're going to do anything it takes to get reelected. And for Tim, it's about, because he gets huge support from the party. Tim's raised a lot of money from his party members, and from Nancy Pelosi. So if Nancy Pelosi says, do this, Tim, and I'm going to support you, Tim's going to do it. And term limits take that off the table, because you know after a certain period of time, and I've already signed a term limit pledge, after a certain period of time, you got to go and let the next guy in. So I think you got to do that. I think also in terms of the bills, nobody is going to understand a bill with 4,000 pages. It doesn't matter if you're the smartest person in the world, you're not going to be able to sit there. I don't think you can read it. It'd be so boring. So I think we got to shrink down the size of the bills. I think, you know, in business, if something's more, I mean, in my business, something's more than 10 pages is too much, but maybe you make it 100 pages or 200 pages, you put a number and you say, no bill can be longer than that. That also stops people from throwing all this junk in, because you're right. Obamacare, the Affordable Health Care Act, is filled with stuff that has nothing to do with health care. I mean, there's a tax, when you sell your homes, there's I think it's a 3.8% tax. Now, it's not on everything, the wholesale price, but on a portion of it, above a certain amount, you're paying a tax on that. There's lots of goodies, in a bad way, in that package, and they're hidden on page 1,842, you know, just to make an example. So you gotta shrink the size of it. And you've got to make it so that every congressman really can read that bill. And it's just not happening today. It's just filled with too much nonsense.
And the other thing I think is really shot in this country is the pride. I mean, we worry more about foreigners coming into this country and being sensitive to them when they're here to destroy us. I mean, I'm not blaming Mexicans coming here, because they are hardworking people.
Sure.
And they're decent people. I mean, you see them in the stores shopping for groceries and stuff. They're not violent people, they're not foul-mouthed people, they're just trying to enjoy the piece of life that they can get because they got better.
Sure.
But you have these people that are coming in, and I am prejudiced about the Muslims because these people are here to destroy us and not to do anything for the country. And how do you stop this? I mean, Obama is directly for helping these people out. He's done everything with the oil over there in this problem they had in Spain. He's worried. He just turned around and gave India, Malaysia, and several other countries a free pass on the oil. Oh, you can buy the oil from Iran.
Yeah.
This is our enemy. How do you turn around and put something to stop these enemies from killing us if we're feeding them all the time?
You know, President Obama clearly has a very different perspective in the world than I do, and I think than you do, and a lot of other people. And I don't think he understands that with terrorists, there is no negotiation with Iran. They are not our friends. And we need to, you know, and I would say, I think that the Iranian people are our friends. You know, there's a huge middle class in Iran who are apparently very staunch fans of the United States.
There's an underground resistance movement
Right.
that gets squashed all the time.
And if there was one
We didn't wanna
mistake we
help them.
probably made, you know, and we make a lot of mistakes, but when that green revolution, remember where there was that revolution bubbling up in Iran, if there's one thing that we could have done, was we could have been supporting that more.
Yeah.
Because regime change is so important in Iran, and that will help us from the nuclear arms issue and lots of other issues right now. So, you know, I don't know what to say. I mean, we need to change presidents. I mean, our president just has that perspective. I think you've got to, Iran's going to understand strength. We need to enforce those restrictions that we have extremely tough. economic sanctions extremely tough, some of the other things we're doing, because we cannot allow Iran to get a nuclear weapon. When they get a nuclear weapon, that is gonna change the dynamics of the entire world. Because suddenly you're gonna have a nuclear arms race in the Middle East, because Saudi Arabia, because remember, we're talking about two different sects of Muslim sects there. Saudi Arabians are going to be terrified that the Iranians have nuclear weapons. And suddenly the place where we depend on, largely on for our oil, is going to be an armed camp. And that's going to have terrible ramifications. You're going to see the price of oil skyrocket. Iran's really then got us. So you got to do whatever you can. We need to be tough. And I just don't agree with the president's perspective. I think Mitt Romney has a right. And I think, frankly, the Republican perspective on that, and there's some Democrats too, but I think it's a better one. But that's not going to change until we change our president.
I think the basic, if you call it a fault or fact with Mr. Obama is he was not raised in this country in his formative years. So he doesn't understand the American way of life, really deep down. He doesn't understand how we think. He doesn't understand, really a lot of the basics of the United States.
Yeah.
And he's working at a disadvantage because he just wasn't here,
Yeah, I don't know why he's acting the way he's acting, he clearly, the guy's never really worked in the private sector. What accomplishments has he had? Even when he was a senator, there's no legislation that President Obama is famous for. By the way, Tim Bishop's been in office for 10 years. There have been four bills that he sponsored that have passed. 4 bills. Now I'm talking about co-sponsored, because everybody co-sponsored, but only four bills have sponsored in 10 years. But with President Obama, I just don't know what he's accomplished. And, people will complain about what he's done in office or hasn't done in office. I said, what do you expect? You're getting what you paid for. This is a guy who's never, doesn't have a record of achievement. I think has a different perspective on the world. Again, I don't know where that perspective comes from, but he does have a different perspective on the role of the free market, the role of America in the world, how we should posture ourselves versus other nations, the leadership role we should take, should we be leaders or followers? He has a different perspective on that. That's what the guy is. He's made no bones about it. And can we afford 4 more years of that? I mean, by the way, right now, President Obama feels like he has to cater to the middle a little bit because he wants to win re-election. But after 4 years, all gloves are off. I think it's a bad scene. I think we've got to make that change, and we need a Congress and a Senate, a House of Representatives and Senate as well to change that. I think we have that opportunity, but it's going to be a tough election. I tell you, it'll be a tough election right here in the congressional district, and it's going to be a tough presidential race.
Now, in terms of the borders, do you think it's possible? Do you think it's a good idea to close the borders for a period of time? Are we the only country in the world that doesn't have closed borders?
I don't know the answer to that, but if we do not manage and control our borders, if we do not secure our borders,
Some sort of control.
we will have it is a disaster waiting to happen. Terrorist groups coming in.
Yeah.
And we have so many points of vulnerability. Why shouldn't we try to limit that? Why would we let them come into our country?
I mean, even if it was only temporary until we got a system going that we could document as they came through.
We have to do it. And by the way, when we address the problem of illegal immigration, unless we stop the flow, the problem's going to be back again. I mean, back in the 1980s, President Reagan, maybe not in his finest moment, granted amnesty to all the illegal immigrants that were here. The problem is, right after doing that, more people came in. We didn't control our borders, and now we've got even larger problems. So unless you can stop the problem, and my grandparents are immigrants. I am pro-immigration, but I'm pro-legal immigration, and I'm pro ensuring that our borders are safe. I'm pro ensuring that everybody's on the books here, paying into the system. We can't afford to give people social services for free. We just don't have the money for it. That's what I support, and we've got to get going on it. So.
What do you feel about photo ID for the voting?
I think it's absurd to me. You do not have to show your photo ID to vote. I mean, you have to go if you go to New York City for work to go to a meeting and you're in a building. You have to show photo ID to go up in the elevator. I mean, you have to show photo ID everywhere. The fact that you don't have to show photo ID when you vote, and by the way, a lot of the times they'll even help you out because they'll turn around the book and show you where you should sign. And by the way, right above that person is the person's signature. So it's a joke. Again, we want everybody to vote. In Long Island, actually, most people are registered after motor voter passed. Most people registered here. I think 81% of Long Islanders are registered, which is terrific. The more turnout, the better. But we want people to vote who are legally here. It just seems elementary to me. You know, right now in Florida, I was just listening to trying to purge the voter rolls. Have you heard about this? People, I mean, my goodness, when you hear about it, it doesn't sound unreasonable to me. I mean, these are folks who, 100,000 people who apparently aren't even U.S. citizens.
Aren't even alive.
And they're giving various ways for folks to stay on the rolls. I mean, so, you know, you can come back and prove it. I mean, but yet, there's this big fight. The federal government is trying to, you know, try to sue Florida. They're going to sue them right back. I just don't understand that. That's just a question of fairness and honesty.
How do you feel about the Canadian pipeline?
The Canadian pipeline. Look, we got to do it. It creates a lot of jobs. It helps America become energy independent. And if you're an environmentalist, and by the way, I support the environment. I have an electronics recycling company. If you support the environment, you're going to still be drawing for that oil anyway. It's just going to be going to China. I think that's their alternative to sending to China. So I'd rather come here. I'd rather depend on the Canadians for oil than depend on the Saudi Arabians, depend on other countries. So.
And there are ways of being, I think, environmentally responsible too. As more time passes, we learn of better methods to preserve the environment.
100%. And look, the problem is right now we are addicted to fossil fuels. Our cars run on fossil fuels. So we could pretend that it doesn't, and lots of windmills and solar plants, all that's going to power our cars. It's just not reality. So the reality is we need oil. So I'd rather get oil here and do it properly and make sure, because we're going to be much more environmentally sensitive than some other countries are going to be. Do it properly and bring down the prices here and create jobs here.